What do you love about being outside and active?
I'm sure I've spent more time outdoors than in. That just feels like home.
Enjoy what you can do, because you never know what is around the corner.
Just being outdoors in the fresh air, it just clears my mind.
Fully immersed in nature is what brings me the most joy.
Hello and welcome back to the Outside and Active podcast, where this week my guest is Nicky Chisholm. Nicky describes herself as an everyday adventurer, squeezing adventures into her everyday life from walks, swims and runs to film, podcasts and books. She has just hit 50 and her adventure journey has changed so many times over the years, from a 20-year-old canoeing and sailing instructor to a mum with young children teaching them to embrace the outdoors, to a mum of young teens surfing and climbing Ben Nevis. Now that her children are in their late teens and slowly flying the nest, she now finds herself ready to embrace that next stage of her adventure journey. Her journey has included marathon walks along Hadrian's Wall, abseiling down castles, a cross-country ski marathon in the Arctic Circle, and a recent trip to Peru, visiting the Amazon rainforest. This episode is all about adventure and how everyday, quote-unquote, normal people can find adventure in their everyday lives. Finally, wherever you're listening to this podcast, it would massively, massively help us if you leave a review on this episode and tell me how you are enjoying the Outside and Active podcast. If you think you know someone who would enjoy it just as much as you, then forward it on to them. And if you're watching on YouTube, then drop a subscribe and a like. That's enough of the intro. Let's get straight into this episode with Nicky Chisholm. Hello and welcome back to the latest episode of the Outside and Active podcast, and I'm very happy today to be joined by Nicky. Nicky, hello, how are you doing?
Good morning, Tom. Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure. I'm really looking forward to chatting all things adventure, and we've just been chatting before we started recording about how we feel about adventure, and I'm looking forward to getting into that. But I'm going to kick off this episode by doing what we always do. And I'm going to offer you a piece of advice that someone who has been a guest on the podcast before has left, and they don't know who they're leaving it to. And this piece of advice comes from the amazing and the really, really lovely Jordan Wiley. And his piece of advice was, for him, he likes to follow the ABC rule. And the ABC rule is A for attitude, B for build relationships, and C for continuing professional development. And they're the three things that he really lives every day by: attitude, build relationships, and continuing professional development. So I guess the question that leads on from that for you is how do you take this advice? How does that advice resonate with you in your life and your adventures?
I think attitude obviously is really important. As a mum of two teenage boys, I'm really aware of my attitude that filters down into the family. So if you show good attitude, it's that expression, don't do what I say, do what I do, or is it do what I do what I say? But it's like you're getting the kids to absorb by osmosis what you're doing. So they take on board your actions, how you're doing it, and your attitude. And that attitude is an adventure. It's in problems in life, problems in school. So attitude, I think is completely key, because everyone faces curveballs in their life, and it's how you address and tackle those curveballs. You change how you respond to them. You can cry in a corner for a couple of hours, which is fine, then pick yourself up and get on with it, or you can take it on board and be miserable for days. So attitude is totally key. I get it. Build relationships. Well, my business for the last 10 years is been running an entrepreneurial networking group for women. So building relationships is key. It's like, it's not who you know. What's the expression? My expressions are rubbish this morning. It's who you know.
It's not what you know, it's who you know.
It's who you know. Yeah. So if I've got a question now on my phone, I just text people. So I could text you now, say, Dom, what do you think of this? Or I've got friends that I've got people in high places and people in low places. It depends on kind of what you're looking for. Building relationship is key. It opens doors. It opens opportunities.
Yes,
and
totally.
I think it's key that you give. And I wouldn't say take, 'cause that sounds horrible, but it's got to be two ways. If you help someone go up, I'm a massive believer. Help someone rise. Get behind them, literally lift them up. You have to lift them up physically, lift them up, get them over a hurdle, get them through that doors, unlock a door, shove them through the door sometimes because they're literally so terrified. And also when you believe in someone, they begin to believe in themselves. So building that relationship. And then I'm a big believer, what goes around comes around, without a shadow of a doubt. And then continuing personal development. again, that's important because we're going to touch on this later. Adventure changes as you go throughout your life. And there's always millions of things to learn. So what do you want to learn about? I've just been learning about Peru, or I'm now going to learn about first aid, or I'm learning about new authors. I mean, you can learn all the time and you can continue professional development. I mean, there's millions of things that you can do in terms of an adventurer developing, or a businessman or businesswoman. I think it's key because you also meet new people, and those people, again, there's a circle. You meet relationships, new opportunities. And if you stay at home and do nothing, nothing's going to happen. But if you walk through the door and you meet people, I think the world's your oyster. It takes practice. I understand that.
I think you said it then in relation to building relationships, opportunities, and I think that you could almost relate that to all three of those ABCs, because opening doors, opportunities is exactly, especially when you're someone like yourself that's keen to get outside and try new things and try different things. Opportunity is, and opening those doors that open for you are so important. So I like that you said that. The next question that I always ask to everyone, and I love this question because it's purposefully vague, is what do you love about being outside and active?
I've been thinking about this one actually because I knew you were going to ask it, and I think there's two points. I feel like my body is like a battery. So you plug in your iPhone when you go to bed and you plug it in, you recharge it. So there are so many curveballs when I think about the kids, illnesses, hospitals, visits, parents, being poorly, running your own business. I mean, there are so many curveballs that come at you left, right, and center. So you need a way to recharge your battery. So I use adventure, big and small, to recharge my battery. But the other side to that is when you're on an adventure, I see the world like a snow globe, and you're shaking the snow globe up and it's completely mental. And some days are so mental, you just don't have time to think because there's so much going on. But when you're in an adventure, the space begins to quieten down. And then all the snow globe begins to settle. And what rises above then is new ideas, new contacts, new feeling, new opportunities, new scenes, new ideas, and it sparks. I mean, I'm never short of an idea, so I need to keep. My problem is keeping my sparks under control. But I think the snow globe analogy, you can visualize the peace and what comes out of that, because when there's all that chatter, you can't see stuff. But when you're out on an adventure and you're on a hill, and it's quiet and there's no one there, or you're at night and you're walking somewhere, there is that space to give your brain the opportunity to flourish there and thrive. Yeah.
Picking up on the analogy of the battery, that I would say some people would think about going on an adventure and taking on a new journey, or going somewhere and doing something that's going to take physical activity or drain you in that way, would see it as quite tiring. Whereas you've said it in a sort of actually life, and that hamster wheel is the thing that's draining me. The energy and the battery that I get back and regain is actually spending time outdoors and taking on these adventures.
Yeah, and I think, and I know we're sort of like, we're going to move into this later, but it's really key to understand the adventure doesn't have to be climbing Everest. If you're sitting I'm in Brighton, sitting in my home in Brighton, the chances of me climbing Everest are slim, because one, I don't want to, two, I don't have the money, three, I don't have the experience, and four, I can't be asked. But I will go for a swim. I'll meet my sea swimmers and we'll go for a swim. So go for a swim, and at the moment we've got a seal on the beach. So we'll see the seal, we'll have a cup of coffee on the beach. So you're having a mini adventure. So don't look at maxi adventures, look at your mini adventures. In there, your snow globe can happen. Again, it's flipping it. You could see adventurers exhausting, which they are, financial, emotionally, but they're also what gives you the power. I think I see it as a power. It sort of like powers you up. And again, my life is changing because my kids are getting older. I'm getting more chance to power up, and my snow globe is settling slightly.
Let's give people, before we jump into those adventures and your definition of adventure as well, let's give people a bit more of a context around you. You've kind of touched on it as well, but who is Nicky? Who are you? What is your background, and why are we chatting here today?
Okay, so my name is Nikki. I live in Brighton with my husband and my 2 teenage boys and my cat. And of course, Daisy, my camper van, who I love. She's my pride and joy. And she never answers me back. She's always where I left her. And she just gives me such utter joy when I'm driving her. So I live in Brighton. For the last 10 years, I've been running a business networking group for female entrepreneurs. So it's across the UK and in Europe. We've had on and offline meetings. So we get maybe 20, 30, 40 women in a room. You all pass business around, and it enables women to thrive in their journeys, make connections, and basically get business, get bums on seats, and get money in their banks. So that's what we've been doing for the last 10 years. I wanted to move on from there. We hit 50,000 people, and that's kind of my big thing I wanted to get to. So I was like, Nikki, you've been to Parliament, you've worked with NatWest Bank, you've been on a bus tour, you've done so many things. I thought, I will need a change now. What am I going to do? So I hit 50, and a few crazy ideas came into my head. So I moved on from running my own business, passed it on to a new director, and it's still running. And I thought, right, I'm going to run a half marathon in Greenland. And then I'm going to set myself up as a blogger in the adventure space, particularly looking and focusing on opportunities and websites and magazines that would be up for adventures and the written word on adventures for. I'm 50, my kids are moving on, they're teenagers, we're going to move on to empty nest syndrome, you've got a whole menopause thing thrown in there, and there's millions of us out there. And I think so many women, when they get to this age, it's an opportunity to flap your wings and think, Christ, I've been a mum for 20 years. I'm off on an adventure. And this is where I'm at. And I'm literally chomping at the bit thinking, where can I go next? And my boys are behind me. My husband is behind me. And I just think I've done 20 years now, nearly as a mum. What am I going to do? The world is my oyster. And obviously it depends on money and finance and all the rest of it. But yeah, that's kind of where I am now. And in my circle down here, I'm known as Pink Nikki. So I always have Pink Nikki on my blogs and my flags and all the rest of it, because there's so many Nikkis in my group. So in the end, they said, Nikki, you always wear pink. You've got to be Pink Nikki. So that's where Pink Nikki was born. And she's off now to sort of like find her feet in the adventure world. And hence why I've come across you, Dom, and, your website.
Is it exciting? Is it quite nervous? Like you said, that empty nest, and your kids are moving away, and now great, you have this opportunity, but is it kind of quite a nervy thing as well?
It's weird. It's a double-edged sword, because my job is to enable my boys to be assets to the world, to be part of the world, to give to the world, to be part of a team, and to grow and to thrive. But to do that, you have to let go. They're not going to thrive in my house. They need to get their own jobs. They need to move out. They need to work, and they could travel. And you have to let go. And letting go, I'll cry. So I'm not going to say much more. You have to let go. You have to let go, and you need to be really proud. So my son's got his driving test tomorrow, and I'm like, I'll be so proud of you. I'll be terrified. He's 18 years old and driving, thinking he's Charlie Big Bananas, and I'll be terrified. But my job is to say, get out there, do your driving test, go traveling. So you need to let go, and I think it'll be a couple of years where there are mums like me across the country, kids are going to university. You have to let go. One of my girlfriends, she said she spent 2 days in bed crying when her son went. And I was thinking, I get that. So there's millions of women like me at this stage in life thinking, I'm championing my kids, but equally you've done a good job and this is what you should have done. So that's where I'm at. And I think I'm trying to keep myself busy and have adventures planned. So as they move on, my space changes. They're moving on, moving out, and my space is not filled with nothing. It's filled with energy and fun and adventures. And that's really important. And it is scary, but what's the alternative? I don't want to sit at home waiting for my kids to turn up every 4 weeks.
No, you want to get outside and adventure. And that word adventure is very subjective, I think. So that's the question I'm throwing over to you is, for you, how would you define that word that we use so frequently, and we've used so frequently already, but how would you define it?
I think it's different for everyone, because someone has a big adventure. And I think my first adventure when I was 18, I was on a sail training ship at just 18, sailed across to France. I was seasick all the time. I was homesick, cried all the time. But I learned to eat Mississippi mud pie for a week and I loved it, you know. So that was my first adventure. So I've been doing it ever since. So I think my comfort zone has grown. So I think if you've got a small comfort zone, start by signing up for a 5K or a park run, or get your mate, hold a hand, go for a picnic on the South Downs Way. So I think it's relative to the adventures that you've done. My comfort zone has got bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And now I'm thinking, God, my God, what can I do next? Because I'm happy to step out of that. So I think your comfort zone will shape the adventures that you currently have. And as you do different adventures, I mean, I know that you know this because every person that does the adventure, you don't ever start out on an ultra. And I know you've done an ultra. You start out with a walk on a park run, you do a 5K, and then you might do an 8K for a charity, then you'll do a 10K, then you think, I like a half, and then somebody will say to you, crazy idea, let's sign up for the London Marathon, and you get into the ballot. So it's a series of steps. So I think adventure is a series of steps, and you've got to find your thing. Is it that you want to walk or run or fly to Peru or go to Antarctica? I looked at going to Antarctica and it was 20 grand to sign up for the marathon.
Wow.
20 grand. I kept, because I did the Greenland thing and I was thinking, oh, I'm going to do something else. And I thought I'll sign up for that. And then when I saw 20 grand, I thought, no, okay. So adventure is shaped by your resources, your time. You know, it's different for every single person. And also where you in your life. When I was 18, I was a water sports instructor. When I was 19, I was windsurfing. And then I did my safety boats. And then I moved on to World Challenge. So I was taking kids on adventures, so to Thailand. Then I was a mum. So the adventures are then around the kids.
Yeah.
And then you do your camping and you do your staying in weird places. And then as they get older, you can start to teach them to surf, to coast steer. And now they're moving on. Now my adventure. So adventure changes for every single one. But I think what you've got to do is embrace it and find your adventure. And also, I think it's really good now that the adventure space is full of women doing their thing. It used to be quite the beardy weirdies going up Everest. Don't get me wrong, that's amazing. God, of course it is. But it's also a very niche and narrow people that can do that. I mean, because it must be 150 grand to do that anyway. Yeah. And it's sort of like saying, well, that's adventure. Well, it's not. And now there's festivals, there's the Armchair Festival, there's the Kendall Festival, there's community groups for Tough Girl Challenges, Love Her Wild, Her Adventures. Yeah. There are so many spaces for women now. So again, that's changed. I think the world's your oyster. I think you just got to go online and have some fun and see what's out there.
I've got 3 different directions of topics that you've spoken about in there that I'm now weighing up how we meander through those, because I think this, I mean, firstly, I've written it down because I loved it so much. Adventure is a series of steps. I've not heard it set out like that before, and I really like that, so I've written that down. And I think it's so true the way that you explained it. From people that I've spoken to that have walked across Africa to people around me at work that are taking on their first 10K. What you said there is so true about, you don't just, very rarely do people go straight in at the deep end. It's actually a series of steps. And I think one of the most amazing things that I've discovered through my own experiences, but then also talking to people such as yourself, is that you finish your 5K, you do your first park run or your first couch to 5K, and your brain goes, oh, I didn't think I'd ever be able to do that. What can I do now? And it becomes that's where the idea of the steps come from. Oh, I didn't realize I could do that. What could I do now? And then it becomes a sort of snowball of, like you said, I've taken an ultra marathon, and now I'm thinking, oh, what about a further distance? Whereas 2 years ago, before I'd started doing what I'm doing, the idea of running a marathon, I'd almost resigned to the fact that I'm happy that I'll never do one. I will probably never do one. I'm happy with that. And fast forward 2 years, I'm thinking about taking on, a 70, 80 mile event. It's ridiculous, but that's obviously on one side of the scale. But, they've got people that are in our company that are going, I'm going to take on my first 10K or 5K. And I'm like, you just wait until you finish that, and you'll see what happens when you finish that. And you'll think, oh, maybe I can do a half marathon. So I really loved the way that you said that. I just wanted to put more of a spotlight on it. One of the other things that you spoke about was obviously balancing your adventures and your relationship with the outdoors with other things in your life, whether it be work, but obviously you mentioned kids there as well. And we spoke at the beginning about passing good habits down and wanting your kids to be a good ambassadors in the world and good for the world. How have you tried to, ingrain's the wrong word, but, you know, encourage them to enjoy the outdoors and appreciate the outdoors as they've grown up?
I suppose I never tried to teach them it per se. I basically loaded the van up, put them in it. Our first camping adventure was when they were 2, and they just kept wandering off. So I think outside the box. That's how my brain works. I think outside. So I went to B&Q and I bought loads of chicken wire, and I literally created a chicken wire fence around the camp, our little camp. So they were able to wander, but not wander off. So it was like there was a problem when they're young, and you think around it, and they did it. So that was at 2, and then at 3 we stayed in the caravan. Then at 4 we stayed in like a converted bus, a converted gypsy caravan. So 4, 5, 6, 7. So it's like doing rather than teaching. So when they're there, they can feel how adventure feels. I'm cooking marshmallows on a fire. I'm climbing up a tree. I'm making a rope swim. The boys, their favorite thing now, even at in their teens, they love massive sand dunes, running down it as fast as they can. Their legs fall out underneath them, and then they land in a heap at the bottom. They've been doing that since they were little, and they still love it. And they say, can we go somewhere where there's sand dunes? So my filter mechanism when I'm searching out is campsites with massive sand dunes, and that's a really weird filter, and there's very few that kind of come up. So it's kind of like doing the stuff with the boys and showing them how it feels. It doesn't always work, and we've had some absolute blindingly dreadful storms.
I can imagine.
And we've had some cut legs, hospitals. I found out I was allergic to wasps and ended up in A&E. Wow. Really weird, just stuff that's just like, okay. And the last adventure we had was last year. Massive storm came through at Croyd, battered down the campsite. Everyone was wet. The kids were wet. Inside was wet. The gazebo had blown off. So we literally loaded the van up at like 5 a.m. and drove home. And I was literally crying, going, this is my only holiday this year, going, it's just so terrible. And everyone was traveling back from Cornwall in the morning. But the kids still laugh about it now. So it's do stuff with them so they understand how adventure feels to them. That
sounds like one of those stories that becomes a great story, but in the time you really, really wish that it wasn't happening.
Oh, it was awful. The kids hated it, but I bribed them with 20 chicken nuggets. I was like, boys, pack this camp up. We are going. I'll buy you McDonald's on the way home.
One of the ways that you describe yourself in your bio on the ONA website is as an everyday adventurer. And it would be interesting to hear from you an example of what an everyday adventure can be, because you said you spoke about going to Greenland and all of these awesome, Peru and all of these awesome things, but I think we kind of touched on everyday adventure, and working that in is also very important as well.
I think I do. I think I've got into a habit now. I try and do something along the lines of adventure every day. So generally the books I'm reading they're about adventure. So it could be a book that I'm reading. It could be a movie. So I've just watched a movie on the diving. It's on Netflix. I've just forgotten the name of it. The Last Breath, The Deepest Breath.
Yes.
So watching a movie, listening to podcasts, reading books, talking to people like you, writing blogs, planning something, researching something. So even if it's like 5 minutes, I'm kind of feeding my adventure. And then if you've got a couple of hours, get my trainers on and go for a walk, go for a run, go for a swim. So some days I've only got 15 minutes. I'll get out of the house and literally walk around the block. It's not an adventure, but it's outside. I'm in the sunshine or the rain, because we've had a lot of rain, but I'm still outside. It's still, Nicky, you've done something today. So, or I've got big adventure quotes on my wall. So if I walk down the stairs, the first thing I see is, adventure. It's just, you can do it. It's like a habit. It's totally like a habit.
Where do you find inspiration from? Because the idea of asking that question came from, reading books about other people's adventures or potential adventures, and watching documentaries and watching films and potentially reading other people's blogs about their own things. Where does your inspiration come from? Do you find inspiration from yourself, from other people that you may look up to, or your peers?
That's a really good question. It's like, I think it comes from sort of a multi-level places. So I was just reading a lady, I think she's like a grandma, and she decided to visit all the national parks in America. So that was her thing. She's like 90. So she did that. Another lady, she was a grandma, and she went around the UK on a bus pass. Another lady, she decided to visit all the national trusts and eat scones and have afternoon tea at all the national trusts. Another lady, she's a disabled swimmer, and she's literally swimming the channel in relay at the moment over sort of these few days. Another friend of mine, she did a mile swim between two islands. So I think I just look for, I'm in those communities online, and I think, bloody hell, that's good, that's interesting, that's amazing. And you kind of think, well, you just find your thing. You know, I don't want to have afternoon tea at all the national trusts, but I would like to go to Antarctica and run a half marathon. I think you find your thing, and then you find your tribe and your community that like ignites that spark. You think, well, she can do it, why can't I do it? And then you make it happen. So it might be a year's time that I could go back to Peru, but I've got to save up enough money for a year's time. I've got to make sure it's not around the kids when one of them's doing their GCSEs. So it's shaping that as well. There's so much inspiration out there. The festivals, the film festivals, or the Armchair Festival, or the Kendall Festival, or the Banff Film Festival.
Yeah.
I mean, we are not short of inspiration. We seriously, and if you are, I think you're bonkers. You must have your head in the sand.
You're so right. Banff, we've worked with, and obviously Kendall is massive, and the Ocean Films as well that we've promoted a little bit, and some of the images, trailers, films. I mean, it's absolutely incredible, and it also reminds you of how incredible the natural world is. So there's totally so much inspiration there, and you touched on it there of if she can do it, why can't I? And you said it earlier about encouraging women to be in this world, and how has it changed, and how has the adventure world, or has it, I guess, become more inclusive over time?
It's huge. It's really huge, and it's really taken off the last 5 years. I remember when I was first doing my British Canoe Union when I was 18, starting out as a trainee canoe instructor, then an instructor. They weren't necessarily female changing rooms. They weren't like the sanitary bins for women. It was really sort of male orientated. There weren't the books. We didn't have podcasts back then. There weren't the books. It was very male orientated, but I mean, now there is a space for women, whatever shape and size, whatever age. It's really inclusive. And I think it also things like the kit has changed. So it used to be sort of one size fits all, and now they've got shape for women, whether you've got hips, whether you've got boobs. There's all the right sort of shape. So wetsuits fit better. Smaller sizes. Totally. It's much more inclusive. And I think people still feel afraid. Like I wouldn't go to like an all male gym. I mean, I wouldn't. So you find there is a space for you. There is categorically a space for you. Just go out and find it, and don't be afraid. There is books, podcasts, radio interviews. The speakers at festivals now lines up the panels, the speakers, the headline speakers. There's women there, and why shouldn't there be? It's like 50% of the population, so it's always that you're looking for a balance. You're looking for that balance. I don't want women to dominate, don't want men to dominate. It's a balance in that space, in any space. And I was trying to say to the boys about International Women's Day. Why do they do International Women's Day? Well, I said, look at Parliament, look at the Prime Minister's question time. There must be 95% of men in Parliament. Until there's 50-50, that's why we have International Women's Day, to highlight that. And it's not about banging on about a woman, it's banging on about the equal space and equal ideas for all, really. So I think especially in the adventure space, we have come a very long way. I've still been to events where there is no facilities, but then there's no facilities for anyone because that's the adventure that you're in. You sign up for that, you know, you sign up for a crazy space. You have to get on with it.
Yeah, I think this podcast is connected to the National Outdoor Expo, and I know that the team that work on that really, the content team especially, put a lot of focus on providing a speaker lineup and panel lineup that is full of equality, whether it be race, demographic, sex, and you know, anything to do with that. Because why that's so important is you're encouraging the next generation of people to love the industry and the world that we love. And it's very difficult to fall in love with that world if you don't look. If there's someone that doesn't look like you or you don't relate to, they're going to go, well, maybe as a young person, a 10, 15-year-old looking up going, oh, well, there isn't a woman that loves to canoe, so maybe that's just not a space for me. Whereas if you providing that platform for a person to talk about it, then you're going to inspire a whole next generation of people. So I think that is so important. And another thing that I wanted to ask you about is, again, you touched on it earlier, I think there's a misconception that in all forms of exercise and being outdoors and trying new things and moving to a different career or anything to do with that there's an age limit, that there's a certain point where you hit this age and you go,
woohoo,
oh, that's it, I can't
true.
do anything new anymore. Why is this a misconception, and how maybe for you, as you know, since turning 50, how have you, well, you've said it earlier, but a new lease of life?
I think for everybody, I think it's being brave. I think it's, have you got the resources behind you? Have you got the confidence behind you? And I think everybody that hits 50 thinks, okay, I'm either going to get myself a Lamborghini if you can afford one. I'm going to, I don't know, do something crazy, do a bucket list. So 50 definitely focuses the mind without a shadow of a doubt. So I knew that I wanted to change my career. I've done 10 years and I always had 50,000 visits in my head. I really wanted to get that I'm quite sort of goal orientated and quite ambitious. So I thought I want to get to 50,000, and I kind of knew and had all sorts of shenanigans and fun along the way. But I think you can change, but you need to, I'm a real planner. You need to change the steps. So plan your steps. You can't just like finish your job on the Monday and then think, well, what am I going to do on the Tuesday? I think for me, it's like, some people do. I was sort of like, you know, plan how you move forward. And I think being 50, I think for me, it's just, again, the kids are changing. My life is changing. The chapters in my life is changing. My role as a mum is changing. And I think that space needs to be filled with something. I don't want to be at home knitting or gardening. You know, that will come when I'm older because I, you know, haven't got the energy or the ability. But I think it's a time to embrace it. You know, it really is a time to embrace, as long as you're healthy and you keep fit and you've got that energy. And, you know, your adventures, again, just don't have to be really expensive. I've just come back from the Amazon, so that was expensive. I know that, but now I can't do anything until next year. So anything I do will be local. So it'll be camping and walking and swimming and ice baths. I'm doing a 5K in September and a sea swim. So it's all local, not expensive. So you plan your adventures to the resources and time that you have. I
think that last little sentence is so important. It's what's your time, what's your financial resource, what's your physical ability, and then you plan around that. I think that's so important.
Yeah, your physicality. Like being 50, I decided to do a half marathon in Greenland. So I spent a year going from like what do you call it? Like couch potato, like not a runner. Like couch to 5K.
The couch to 5K, yeah. Couch
to 5K. So I did couch to 5K, then I did 5K to 8K, 8K to 10K. So I just built over a period of a year. And then obviously the idea of Greenland was terrifying because it's so cold. So I trained in an environmental chamber with the University of Sussex. So I trained in there. It was minus 20, and then we did minus 10, minus 5. So I was looking at how it affected my body, my breathing, my emotions. I mean, minus 20 is just horrible.
I can imagine.
I scared myself to death after that training session. So I sat in the car and cried, drank a pint of tea and ate a Mars bar. I was just like, what am I doing, you idiot? But next time I went in, and it just shows your comfort zone. Next time I went in, I felt better. and then I felt better. So it's just that was a really good example. So I was training for the cold, looking at the right kit, you know, 1 pair of gloves, 2 pair of gloves, 3 socks, 2 socks, 1 jacket, 2 jacket. I needed to have spikes on me. What could you carry? How it slows you. I mean, it really slows you down. You know, you really get slower, and it literally sucks the life out of you. It's like in the Harry Potter movies when the big baddies come in there, you can feel it literally sucking the life out of you.
I can only imagine.
It was scary, but when I was out there, it wasn't that cold. So weirdly enough,
you were prepared for it.
I'm always prepared.
Let's dig down into a couple of these adventures from both sides of the spectrum. Firstly, let's go with the top end. What's been your favourite adventure, trip, journey? And you can use favourite in any sense of, it's your own definition.
My favourite with the kids is when we took them to paddle down the Ardèche. So we had Canadian canoes. The kids are in there. They're about sort of 12 and 10. And I just felt so proud that I'd got that far. They were paddling along, and it just made my heart sing that we're all together as a family, and I just completely loved it. So that was my favourite with the boys. And then my favourite for me is my recent one, because I've been reading about the Amazon since I remember 18. I had my first book that my mum gave me for my birthday. So there I was down in southern Peru in the Amazon. I had a flask of tea. It was about 5 a.m. The sun's coming up. There's all these butterflies. And I was thinking, I could just feel my heart just full of, I don't know what it was, just full of happiness. I don't think I've ever felt that happy. And I was in the middle of nowhere. There was 4 of us, and there was millions of butterflies. You could see caiman, and I was just thinking, oh my God, I suppose I felt privileged. I felt happy. I was amazed. I was thinking, you've got, and also it ignited another spark. This is only the beginning, Nicky. So that's dangerous. It's dangerous. It's only the beginning. And it was just beautiful. I mean, what a privilege.
Yeah, a real sense of, like you said, you had 18 years old reading about the Amazon, learning about the Amazon, and then for you to then go there and experience that. And almost, it seems from the way that you explained it and seeing the look on your face, it was almost a sense of real being in the present and acknowledging actually where you were and what was going on, and really feeling those feelings. It must have been amazing.
Yeah, I mean, it took me 30 years to get there. I mean, God, I don't want to wait another 30 years. I won't be able to walk by then. But I mean, it was just a real experience, because it's something that's, you know, and also if you want to do a big adventure, you can make it happen. If it's in 5 years, great. Keep saving now, researching now, get fit now, make sure you're psychologically, physically fit, make things happen. If it is in 5 years, that's great. You know, you can go out of your house in 10 minutes time when this podcast is finished, or you can start planning for 5 years time. I mean, that took me 30 years to get there. It just, you know, I had my, you know, you got poorly parents, or the kids are at school. You just can't manage it. It's just not possible. But honestly, that's just part of the world that you're in, and it's a world that you just don't see.
And
I want to see more of it.
Absolutely. And taking a different angle on your adventures, what's maybe been the hardest or the scariest adventure that you've taken on?
I remember I can feel my heart going now. I remember the start line of the Greenland Half Marathon. I have to say, I was terrified. I was streaming down my face thinking, you idiot, what are you doing? There was a guy on the start line with a gun in case any polar bears came by. It was about -10. I was just going onto the glacier. It's the first time I'd run in spikes, because you can't practice running in spikes.
No.
So I was super prepared. But I was just thinking, I was just streaming and shaking. I could literally see my hands shaking. I just wanted to do the start line. And as soon as I stepped across the start line, it was just run. One step in front of the other. And that's what I always say, one step in front of the other. Just one little step. And if you can do one step, you can do 2 and 3 and 4. But it's just cross that start line. And then I stopped shaking. It was just because you're like a car on the start line going vroom, 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 and you just want to let go.
Yeah.
I was just like, let me go, because I'm just going to internally combust here. Just let me go. And then the gun went off, and vroom, you're off. And it was great. But I just remember like shaking. I was cold. I was scared. I was terrified. I've never done anything like that before. But I was thinking, then I got across the finish line. I was like, what can I do next? I was like, oh God, Nicky, just give yourself a break.
Was it an immediate, you crossed the finish line, right, what's next? Or was there oh God, I'm never doing that again. And then a week later you thought, oh, well.
No, I came across the start line. My sister was there at the finish line and she was recording it as I came across, and I was like, oh, I'm so chuffed, I'm so happy. And also, I was really cold, so I was shaking because I was so cold, and I was really hungry because I'd been out there like 3 hours. Because when you're out there, you're not just running, you're scrambling, you're climbing, you're slipping, you're running up and down. You don't just run on the flat. So I was out there for ages, and I was sort of really shaky. And then I was thinking, I must call my mum. So the first thing I wanted to call when I crossed, because I know she'd be out there worrying. So I called my mum straight away. But yeah, your heart just bursts, because I love that feeling of being proud of my husband, proud of my kids, proud of my family. But you don't always get, how often do you get that feeling of being proud of you?
Yeah.
And I just loved that feeling. I was so proud. I was just going to burst. And I was thinking, I just love this. This is great. But I mean, that's a year's worth of time, energy, effort, ridiculous training. And it is all worth it.
Oh,
it is all worth it.
Yeah, definitely. I can see it. For those
smiling.
For those that are listening and not watching, I mean, you just look at your face all through that. You can really feel, again, on the start line of tears and stress, and just let me go, and then to the finish line of like a jubilation of emotion, and you said a culmination of a long time that's gone into planning this and training for this, and then it's actually happening, and then you do go, oh, what's next? It is and a lot of people will be able to resonate with that feeling. It might not be next to polar bears in Greenland, but it will be finishing their first park run.
Yeah, I think it's relative. I think that feeling is relative.
Exactly.
And I think it's really important to constantly get that across. I just didn't go to Greenland. That's taken me years of having adventures. So my first adventure at 18, so my comfort zones got bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. You don't just say, right, I'm just going to run Greenland. You just don't do that. I mean, some people probably do. There were lots of bonkers people there from all across the world, and I met amazing people. They were way more bonkers than me. Amazing. They just come back from running the Australian marathon around Ayers Rock. They'd done the Delhi Marathon. They'd done Everest Base Camp Marathon. Wow. And I was thinking, man, you are like, I was like a newbie. I was a newbie on their scale of mad things to do. So now that was a memory that will stay with me, and I've got the medal and I've got the photograph. And if I'm ever having a bit of a down day and I need to get my shizzle together, I say, Nicky, I know you're having a rubbish day, but look at that. Look at who you can be when you want to.
I love that. What's next for you in your adventure timeline and plans? What's that thing that's in the side of your head ticking around?
Well, I don't know whether I can say it publicly, but I've been working with the Antarctica Reuben. So she wants to be the first Black woman to cross Antarctica. So I've been working with her, doing her social media. So when she's away, I do her posts. And I know she's off to Antarctica at some point in the next couple of years when she gets all her training together. So I would it sort of lit my fire to get down there. Somehow in the next 20 years, I want to get to Antarctica. So I'm going to make a 20-year plan and work out how on earth I can make it happen and see. So that's my long-term plan. Yeah. My short term is to do a 5K. So I'm training for a 5K in September. And then annually for International Women's Day, I'm getting women together, sort of 500 women to swim on Brighton Beach and to celebrate International Women's Day, to celebrate sea swimming, women, the unity and the power that comes from women being together. And I've always loved that, celebrate that. And I can see the power behind that. One little swim can turn into every Friday, can turn into mental strength, physical sense, resilience, happiness. There is a power to being outside with your mates. It's simple as that, whoever you are, wherever you are in the world.
Well, picking up on that word power, I mean, you described yourself as an everyday person, everyday adventurer, but you have almost seems like a superpower. So what is your superpower, Nicky?
That's a great question. I definitely think outside the box. So if I always find a way to make something happen, and I've got amazing staying power. So that that manifested itself when I was 18. I'd be the first in a nightclub and then the last to leave. So that wasn't necessarily a good staying power. But since I've developed as a human being, as a mum and as an adventurer, I have that staying power. So I will outlast everyone just from the fact that, and that's also how I got through academically. I wasn't like super bright, super academic, but I would always do them like lots and lots of work, do the most amount of effort, be the most enthusiastic, and I would just outlast everyone. I didn't do that intentionally, but that just seemed to be my modus operandi. So it's that staying power, and you're there at the end when everyone else has given up, and I'm going, this is fabulous. It's just me. Ta-da! So that's definitely my superpower.
I love that. Where can people go to find out more about you and follow along on your adventures and just be part and, you know, learn more about all of the things that you get involved with?
So find me on Facebook and search for Nicky Chisholm, or hashtag Pink Nicky. Find me on there, and then you can find my link tree for everything else. Just follow along and see what I get up to, because so many people follow what I do and then they say, Nicky, you inspired me to do X, Y, and Z. So I think, just follow the journey, get involved, and message me. I'll always love hearing from everyone.
This podcast has been full of nuggets of advice, but I'm going to ask you for another one, because I opened by offering you a piece of advice from Jordan Wiley, the ABC, and now it's your opportunity to pass along a piece of advice to a guest that will be coming onto the O&A podcast in the near future.
Have a goal, have an adventure, and take one step in the right direction. So if you took one step every day for a week, that's 7 steps in the right direction. One little step every day, and that's 7 steps. That's 14 steps in 2 weeks, that's 28 steps in a month. And you'll be surprised where you are from day 1 to day 28, and you can make it happen.
Nicky, I really look forward to passing that advice along, and I've loved having you on the podcast. Thank you so much.
Thank you. See you soon.
And that brings us to the end of this conversation with Nicky on the Outside and Active podcast. Thank you so much, Nicky, for coming on and telling us about your perception of adventure. I hope that you listening could take something from this, especially the adventure being about little steps. I really enjoyed that. If you think you know someone who would enjoy this episode just as much as you, then please do forward it on to them, and let's grow this Outside and Active community. Also, as I said at the beginning, if you could leave a rating on this podcast, then it would make a huge difference, as well as leaving a like or a subscribe if you're watching along on YouTube. We'll be back next week with another episode of the Outside and Active podcast. Until that time, enjoy the outdoors.